My name's Vicky. I'm an online English teacher, and today I wanted to share with you my top activities for using mindfulness when studying English. So these are activities that you can use in the classroom if you're a teacher, or you can use them if you're a student and you're studying on your own. So they're just some activities that are fun, easy to use in any class. They don't take a lot of preparation, and that can help you to have a more relaxed, enjoyable, and successful learning experience in English. So, before we get started, I just want to say a few things about mindfulness and why it can be useful to use mindfulness when you're studying English. I think for me, the number one thing is that it can increase your attention and your engagement. So if you're studying for fun or for work or for study, it can just help you to be to learn in a faster and more efficient way. The second one I think is really important for online learning especially is that it can really help to reduce stress. We spend a lot of time on the computer, on our phones all the time. And, most people who are studying online are also working online or they're going to school online. And that creates a lot of stress. I think these mindfulness activities can really help professionals or students to have a more relaxing experience. The third point that I think is great for the language classroom specifically is that when we're learning a language, we really need to be using our existing knowledge and learning new words. So thinking about maybe the concepts and the language that we already know about a topic, for example, hobbies. And then as we speak or write or read, we are getting new information, so new vocabulary, things that we need to learn. And with these mindfulness practices, it really gets you to be in the moment, and then you can actually work on a lot of the language that comes up, which is really nice. Fourthly, it's just to create a positive learning experience for everybody. I think that English is something that you can enjoy learning. And lastly, mindfulness is great for any ages. It doesn't matter if it's with children. In fact, it's used a lot in children's teaching, but also for adults and for self-study, for general English, especially if you're doing exams, it can be really helpful. Okay. Before we get into the six, I'm going to share six useful activities, but just some general rule of thumb things to remember, my 3 things to remember. And these are things that I've learned from reading, from my own practice, and also from people who work in mindfulness. Number 1, to remember to listen. It's much easier to help yourself with your own learning or to help other students if you're a teacher, if you are really listening and adapting classes or activities accordingly. So listening to the mood, really listening to what another person is saying, or if you're doing a listening activity. Number 2, try to work on your own mindfulness. So if you are more used to doing some of the practices that I'll share with you, like breath work or body scans, then it's going to be easier to use them and to know when to use them in your classes. And finally, keep it fun. Sometimes when we hear the words mindfulness or mindful study, it can sound quite serious. But actually, these activities can reduce stress, but they're also just a bit of fun. So you can play around and try things, try some of the activities out out, try other things. People like to play around with volume, with lighting, and the videos with online classes. So there's lots of things you can play around with. And yeah, don't be afraid to try things out and see what works for you. So I'm just going to very quickly take you through I'll make my video a bit bigger, the 6 activities very quickly. So the first one, the body scan. This is a really simple activity. Normally, you can just sit in a comfortable position. People can stand if they prefer, or even lie down, but sitting's quite practical for online classes. So just sitting with your shoulders over your hips, nice relaxed position. You can lean back on a chair, you can close your eyes, place your hands wherever feels comfortable, and just take a few deep breaths. I'd like you to take your attention to your toes, move them around a bit. How are they feeling? So I'm not going to take you through the whole body scan, but it's basically going from the bottom of the body all the way up to the top, asking how each part of the body is feeling, and focusing on that. Okay. It can be really fun for kids and for adults if you're learning, like if you're a beginner and you want to learn the body parts. So it can be quite a fun way to teach that vocabulary. But it can be also a nice one, for example, if you have an interview or an exam, like a speaking exam, like an IELTS exam in English. It could be a nice one to do just to be really centered before you do the activity. Okay. The second one is a learning mantra. So this is actually a fun way to play with some vocabulary, but you can have a mantra for your class or for your learning session. So it could be something affirmative. So like, my pronunciation is improving. And then you can say it a few times throughout the class. So you can do an activity and then afterwards when you finish, you can say, my pronunciation is improving. For teachers, this can be quite nice to like practice vocabulary from the week before. You could include it in your mantra. Yeah, and it's just a nice way to give a bit of focus to what you're doing. The third one I really love, especially if you are practicing some kind of writing or reading, even for listening and speaking, but before a language activity, you close your eyes and you spend 60 seconds, so just a minute in silence, thinking about a question or a topic. So for example, if you're going to read an article about travel and food tourism, you can spend 60 seconds thinking about what you know about food tourism. And this can be done in your own language. So for beginners, you might want to get them to think about it in another language. But for more advanced learners, it's a great way to kind of prime what you know and what vocabulary you're expecting. So if you're going to listen to a talk about engineering and you're studying English as well, you can sit and try to think in English for 60 seconds. So it's actually quite a challenge, and it really helps you with vocabulary memory. And so when you do listen or when you do write, you've got a little bit more focus on the language. So that can be really helpful. The 5 senses, penultimate one. The 5 senses is a really nice way to learn vocabulary, and it can be used in any context. So for example, you're going to study the present. Oh, you're going to study the verb can. So I can smell, I can taste, I can hear. You can imagine a place, maybe a country. Okay, if you go to Italy, what can you taste there? What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? So yeah, it can be a nice way to learn like simple grammar, like I can or present simple. But it can also be really nice for any levels, just as a way of getting more focused. So like before a reading, for example, you could think about the topic and think about, okay, maybe if it's based on a place, how can I use my five senses? So that can be quite nice, and great as a speaking activity as well, like a little warmer, to work on fluency. Okay, last but not least, this is really easy to just use at any point in your class. If you're a teacher, if you see that your student's feeling a bit stressed or tired, and sometimes with the online classes, you're studying for 2 hours and it's really tiring. So you can take, right, let's take some breaths, and you just stop. You can close your eyes, get the sitting position, and just really fill up your whole rib cage and lungs. And exhale. Just do 3 breaths like that. And that's, yeah, it's so nice to use, and you can use it if you're a student as well. But it just helps refresh your brain for all the studying, and the thinking in another language. Yeah, so these are some of the 6 that I like to use in my classes. Tell me which ones you'd like to use. And yeah, I hope it was helpful. Happy studying.